Maxim joins me now, I hope. Yes, Maxim, thank you very much for doing so. I'm right, Amantai, that in a way the long-term, maybe even medium-term significance of these events is not really on the battlefield, but on the dramatic changes on the financial and economic fronts that have been provoked.
Well, indeed, thanks for having me in the first place. And secondly, I totally agree with your assessment that the tectonic changes that we're now foreseeing, and actually there will be more of that perhaps in the coming weeks and months, are happening not necessarily in the battlefield, but in other domains. The immediate fallout of the conflict, obviously we've seen this price hike in oil and gas, but also some of the things such as the sanctions on the Russian fertilizers affecting agricultural productions, and will very much echo as far as the assessments go in the autumn, perhaps, as Russia and Ukraine are both major grain exporters to Africa and the Middle East and other countries, but also in a lot of states in the United States that traditionally produce wheats and grain. There hasn't been rain since last autumn, so the production is expected to be very low, which will further affect the agricultural market. In other things, we've come to see this kind of phrase that Russia is a gas station with missiles, and the truth of the matter is that a lot of the commodities that Russia is involved in the production of, say, microchips and semiconductors, some of the rare earth metals produced in Russia are now not coming to the market, which will also affect that domain. A lot of things that are extremely important to the modern development of the world are now halted and will have a long-term effect.
And that's before we turn to the currency issues, which we will. But let me ask you something. If it's true, and I think many now see it, that the United States is using Ukraine as a battering ram, as a cat's paw against Russia, it's also true that the United States is using Europe as a battering ram, as a cat's paw, because they have insisted on such draconian sanctions in Europe that the European economies are now in very serious danger. A New York Times writer put it this way the other day: Europeans are going to have to get used to being hungrier and colder over the next few years. Nobody asked us, by the way, if we wanted to be hungrier and colder. It was the orders from Washington that we do so. And this is causing great problems, obviously, first and foremost in Germany, but in other countries, the Czech Republic, Slovakia, and so on, Hungary, they simply can't do without Russian gas. But here's my point. At the same time, in the last month, the United States itself has increased its purchases of Russian oil by 43% to 100,000 barrels a day. And you mentioned fertilizers, has lifted the sanctions on fertilizers because the farm vote in the United States is going to be very important at the midterms in November. So the US itself is not involved in the sanctions, that it is demanding that European countries, they're ready to fight to the last drop of Ukrainian blood and ready to fight to the last drop of European economic activity, it seems.
Well, that's absolutely right, and I would also say that there isn't really anything new about this pattern of U.S. foreign policy. The United States are, most of the time, are not actually waging any wars without finding an extra source of financing for that. So in this particular conflict, indeed, I think Europe, Ukraine and Russia are the ultimate losers. Ukraine for different reasons, and Europe will be dependent on the US on a number of things for decades to come. China, in my view, is also one of the possible winners of this conflict, as they will also increase their influence over Russian market, and Russia will indeed perhaps most probably increase its own dependency on China. So that will be very unfortunate, I think. And we're coming to this new duopoly, digital duopoly, where the digital power of big tech and Chinese big tech will dominate Europe, and we'll see if it's true for Russia as well. But that seems to be the shaping pattern for now.
Now on the currency, I mean, just en passant, is Joe Biden paying in rubles for the 100,000 barrels a day? Is he paying in rubles for the fertilizer? Do you know?
I have no idea. I think they're not. The issue was only for the gas. I don't think fertilizers were affected by this counter move on part of Russia, and the scheme itself is very tricky. Basically, to put it simply, the countries have to now, the European countries have to purchase. Open actually first and foremost a bank account at Gazprom Bank. This is one of the few banks out there that were not affected by Western sanctions. And some specialists in Russia think that this move on the part of the Russian government to secure the payment for gas in rubles is mostly to secure Gazprom Bank from further sanctions, to keep Gazprom Bank as the biggest bank out there out of sanctions. But the scheme itself is very tricky. So they have to open an account in the Gazprom Bank. They have to transfer their money, euro or dollars, to the Gazprom Bank. Then Gazprom Bank will have to trade them at the stocks and exchange them into rubles, and then transfer it to Gazprom company too. So it's a little complicated. So they're not entirely entitled to purchase rubles per se. But that makes the payment go further to de-dollarize the global economy, in a sense.
And that de-dollarization, in a way, is the big enchilada. By the way, I read earlier today that Peskov had said that the ruble requirement to buy gas will now, next week, be applied to all Russian exports. So it would, if it comes to pass, mean that Joe Biden, if he wants the fertilizer, and he clearly does, or he wouldn't have lifted the sanctions on it, will have to pay in rubles. Wouldn't that be ironic? But this de-dollarization issue is the big enchilada, isn't it? It ends the stranglehold that the United States has had on international commerce, on the banking sector. It ends the monopoly of the SWIFT system, and so on. In a way, that'll be the longest lasting consequence of the events in Ukraine, won't it?
Right. I have to note to our listeners that since the breakup of the Soviet Union, Russia's plan A was not to destroy the West, as many argue. It was to fit into the new Western system on quote-unquote equal footing. And the Russia's concern was that it was never, ever seen as a quote-unquote equal partner. So then the plan B, obviously, since Putin's Munich speech in 2007, was to weaken the dependency of the world on the United States, to de-Americanize the international system per se, and de-dollarization was part of that, of course. Now we are kind of moving at a much faster speed at these policies, but not because Russia is so powerful, Russia is doing something, but it's most obviously because the West is doing something to shoot itself in the foot with its own policies. You've seen the United States freezing and seizing Russian assets and gold, foreign assets, which tremendously weakens the trust in the U.S. Policies for other countries. It seizes the properties of the Russian oligarchs, which actually is doing Russia, I think, in the long term a big favor. Back in the day, Putin traveled to the UK in 2002 to ask the British government to, ban all the oligarchs and seize their property. It took 22 years for the British government to do so. And I think, it actually does a lot of favor to the Russian people in the first place. But ultimately it weakens the trust in the Western institutions, in the Western banking system for other countries that are now investing in the West. And that is something that I think weakens the West in the long run. And that is a major takeout from this conflict so far.
Maxim, thank you very much indeed for joining us at this late hour, Moscow time.